when you think about wanting to create your future, this is really good advice, right? Rather than reacting to what's currently happening, is why don't you take the time and create your own future? Sounds like great advice, but practically, how do you actually do it? Well, there's two things that we probably need as core skills to be able to do that. You can think of it as wisdom and courage. And when you ask people, which one of these two do you lack most to create your own future? They often tell us that it's lack of courage. And that's really interesting, because why do we intuitively feel we need courage? You know, we constantly are gaining wisdom. It's so easy to access information today. It's kind of, if you think about potential energy, you know, gaining more wisdom is like adding potential energy. You're lifting your potential higher and higher. But unless you release it, to release that kinetic energy, work can't get done. And that's where the courage comes in. And I think there's two parts where we need courage. The first part is setting ambitious targets for ourselves and for our organizations. That's the first step in creating your future, is really having the courage to set a really ambitious target for yourself or your company. The second part is, rather than coming up with excuses of why you can't achieve it or why it's out of your control, to think practically about what are the obstacles that can block you or the constraints that can limit you from achieving that target. And one of the things that I use with my clients as a practical way of understanding these obstacles or constraints is a simple technique I call impossible unless. I want to share with you just a quick example of, I was working with a mining company, and this company had the hugely ambitious target of producing 12 million tons that year. And the problem was that in month 4, they only had produced 3 million tons. So they were already falling behind. So the first thing that we did was we looked at what will happen if they don't produce the 12 million, and the consequences were pretty terrible for everybody, for the managers and for the organization and the employees. So that meant that it was really important, and it's always important to check that these ambitious targets are really important to achieve, or that the consequences will be really bad if you don't achieve them. The next step that we did was to ask them, what's currently occupying your attention? And we got them to list out all the initiatives that were consuming or demanding their attention, our scarcest resource. And once they had done that, and I kind of had to stop them at about 100. I mean, the side walls were just filled with all the things that were demanding their attention. I asked them to be very clear about how much each of these initiatives would contribute to giving them more tons. And what they found quite shocking was, by far the vast majority would have no impact on tons. And I think this is a great practical exercise to do for ourselves. So if you did have the courage to come up with this very ambitious target for yourself or for your organization, think about all the things that's currently consuming your scarcest resources, your limited attention, your budget, and make sure that the things that you are working on that's consuming those scarce resources are actually helping you to achieve the target. If not, the first step in the process should be to stop doing those things. That will release the attention and the budget and other scarce resources that you would need to start doing those things that can actually help. But of course, that's not where we have to end. We now have to think about, what are the things that can block us from achieving those targets? Now that we have the available attention and maybe available time and budget available, what can block us? And this is where the idea of impossible unless comes in. Whenever I ask somebody, so what is blocking you from achieving the necessary conditions that you believe needs to be in place? Maybe I need to gain substantial knowledge in this field, or I need to go into a new market, something that might be scary. And I ask them, why don't you do it? The most common response is, it's impossible. And then all I do is I ask them, it's impossible unless? And I just let it hang there for a while. It's impossible unless. What are the conditions that would make it possible? One of the realizations I've had, and maybe it's also your experience, is that we often do a fantastic job at making the possible impossible with the excuses we give ourselves. And this question is just a disruptive question. It's asking that person, so tell me, under what conditions will the impossible becomes possible? And that's often enough to get them to share those things, and then they can start again, right? So now that we understand, okay, to achieve the rate of over 1 million tons a month, what's limiting me? I can't access enough of the ore. What has made it impossible is I don't have enough resource. Under what conditions could you get enough of this resource? And that just unblocks the mind. It gets people unstuck. And that's often all that we need. It's not more courage, but just this question of how to get unstuck. So the next time either you or any of your team get stuck and you tell yourself it's impossible to achieve a target, ask yourself, it's impossible unless.